morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good to see everybody here this morning. It is time for us to begin. We'll be looking at the use of the tongue. Lesson number 8. Let's begin by going to God in prayer. You'll bow with me. Our Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this day you created for us. Opportunity we have to gather together, study your word, lift our voices in praise to you, fellowship with one another. We pray that as we go through this study this morning, that we listen to what your word tells us, and that we strive to implement these things in our lives, that we strive to better use our tongue every day, and that we strive to be a light to those around us at every opportunity we have. Pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Amen. We spent a little bit of time a few weeks ago talking about some of the sins of the tongue when we looked at the 7 abominations to the Lord. What does it tell you when there are 3 of those abominations that deal with using our tongue properly?
Pay attention.
What's that?
Pay attention to what's being said.
Pay attention. Does it say something to us about how important our tongue is, how dangerous it can be? If 3 of the 7 are abominations,
What goes specifically towards lying or not being truthful?
yeah, how sowing discord, lying, false witness. We're not going to look at too many passages from the New Testament. We're going to look a lot from Proverbs, but we're not going to look at too many from the New Testament this morning. But what does the New Testament have to say to us about using our tongue, or the dangers that are present?
Be careful.
Be slow.
Be very careful.
Be careful.
Slow to speak.
Be slow to speak. Remember what James chapter 3 compares it to a couple different things?
Like the rudder on a ship.
Rudder on a ship. You got a huge ship, and how big is that rudder? It's small. It is small compared to the size of the ship. But it navigates us. It says the forest is set ablaze by such a small fire, and the tongue is a fire. And in James 3 it says, every creature on earth can be tamed, but the tongue cannot. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Well, then what's the point of even trying? If our tongue cannot be tamed, it's a deadly poison that we can't control.
It's also a two-edged sword. There's the other side of it.
Which is?
To spread good and positivity and God's word and encourage and uplift and all of those things.
Okay.
If you go down further in verse 10, it says, out of the same mouth proceeded blessings and cursings.
Okay. So we see the positive, then we see the negative, and the negative says you can't control it. So what are we supposed to do? We can't control our tongue. What's the point?
But you can't tame it. Isn't there a difference?
What's that?
It says you can't tame it. Isn't there a difference?
Doesn't say give up.
Okay.
Well, it even gives the example of bridling the animal, so clearly you can do things to steer your tongue in the right direction and its use. And so while the danger is always there, because you can't tame it, make it a docile creature, there are things you can do to control it. And so I think that goes to her point of control and tame may not be the same thing. You can't make it not dangerous, but you can do things to keep it controlled.
That's a good point. We look at sin, and are we ever going to be perfect? So why try? Well, we see many examples throughout the New Testament on reasons why we need to try. Because we can live a life. We can control ourselves. And sure, there are going to be times when we mess up. There's going to be times when we mess up with our tongue. But that doesn't mean we don't try. We don't strive to control, live a controlled, live a tamed life.
Paul had a thorn in the flesh, and I've heard that often say that it was his eyesight or something, but the answer God gave him, it doesn't make any sense to me that it's a physical thing. So I'm thinking there's some sort of sin that just tempted him beyond all bounds that he had to struggle with constantly. I don't know what that is, and by them not saying it lets everybody be in on that, that lesson. Something that he just was struggling with so hard, and he's asked God, just, more than once, just take it away from me. Take this away from me. And God always never did, and he always said, my grace is sufficient for you. So that encapsulates the whole thing. There may be things that we struggle with, that just keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up that we have to fight against all the time. But the fighting is the thing, and God's grace covers the rest.
Right. And I believe that if it's something that you look at taming an animal, you get a dog, fresh from the pound, and dog's not going to sit unless they've been trained properly. Before, dog's not going to shake. The dog may not go outside to use the bathroom, even after one day. You got to continue to train the dog. The same thing is true for our tongue. We have to continue to train it so that when time comes to use it properly, we will be able to do so. Because where does what our tongue say? Where does what our tongue say
Not that.
come from? It comes from our heart.
Well, I was going to just make a quick comment about the poison part of it. For there, that reminds me of snakes, especially little baby ones. It's when a little baby snake bites, it just injects all the venom at once. It has no control. When the older snake does, it only lets a little bit out. And I think that's kind of one of the things he's getting next to the new Christians, the new people, new converts in. They haven't released all the world yet. They have no control, so they're still going to be pumping that toxin in. But as we mature and grow older, like the tongue, as we mature and grow older and gain more control of our tongues, it lessens and lessens to the point where it's very little.
Right. And we're going to get to kind of exactly that a little bit later on, actually towards the end, where we're talking about using the tongue properly. And that comes to knowing when to use it, knowing how to use it, knowing what to say. So all that takes training. We won't be able to control our tongue perfectly, as we're always going to say things we shouldn't say. How many times do we think, oh, I shouldn't have said that? Even if you stop and think, there's going to be times when we slip on saying something. Maybe it's something that just was, it doesn't even have to be sinful, but just things that are better left unsaid, or maybe it's not as beneficial to the person you're talking to. It's just something we always have to work at. So this morning we're going to look at two aspects of our tongue, the good and the bad. If we look at Proverbs 18:21, it says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." So we're going to look at, first we're going to start off looking at the tongue that brings forth death. What are the consequences in life that come from an uncontrolled tongue?
Pain.
Pain?
Regret.
Regret? Yeah.
Isolation.
Isolation.
Distress.
Distress. Okay. That's a good one, Rick. We can think of so many different consequences. Death is a consequence of an uncontrolled tongue, isn't it? Sure it can be. If that uncontrolled tongue's towards somebody it really, really shouldn't be, again. Yeah. Loss of friends, loss of job, loss of family. loss of trust, loss of credibility. There's so many different consequences we see. There's going to be three aspects of this section that we're going to be looking at. A lying tongue, sowing discord, and gossip. Two of those we've looked at before. But the first one, a lying tongue, in chapter 6 of Proverbs. Again, like I did last week, I'm not putting Proverbs up there. So since we're studying Proverbs, hopefully it's easy to follow along with. Starting in verse 16, it says, "There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood." We see it's an abomination to the Lord, a lying tongue, which tells us really all that we really need to know is it good to have a lying tongue? No. Why? Because it's an abomination. If that's quite not enough to solidify it in your mind, in chapter 12, verse 19, "Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment." And then 22, "Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight." So why is it that we lie? Why do we do it?
Well, a lot of times it's to protect ourselves. It's
Okay.
selfish.
What ways we use lying to protect ourselves?
We mess up and don't want to admit it, trying to cover it.
Okay.
I think you said it in the question, it's we use it to protect ourselves. We don't like being the blame, the root of the problem with most people. So whatever I can do to shift that or to avoid it.
Okay.
You can also do it to de-escalate a potential escalation.
That's true.
Do you like this? Why, yes. It's the best whatever I've ever eaten.
Okay.
Thanks, honey.
Yeah.
We're not going to use specifics or anything.
Right.
David, you just gave your position away.
Is that your mother's recipe?
I'm not here. Sometimes it's to get somebody to do something they wouldn't ordinarily do that you want them to be, or to think something that they wouldn't think ordinarily.
Okay. I've got 3. I think all of these things can be kind of combined into 3 different categories. Or actually 4, I'm sorry. Pride, convenience, hatred, covetousness. First one we're going to look at is pride. In chapter 3, verse 27, says, "Do not withhold good from those whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it. Do not say to your neighbor, 'Go and come again tomorrow, and I will give it,' when you have it with you." What is that saying? That doesn't sound like pride. But what is that saying?
There's a couple things that could fit into pride in my mind. One of them is you want to be in control of the situation. And so it may just be, it's not convenient for me right now and I'm more important than you, so maybe tomorrow I'll take care of it, even though I could take care of it right now. So there's a couple ways that it could be pride.
Yeah, I think that's it. Really, in 25:14 it says, "Like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of a gift he does not give." So I think that's kind of the same thing of, you need to borrow my weed eater. Well, I don't have my weed eater right now, meaning it's inconvenient for me. I'll give it to you later. Come back tomorrow when it's a little more convenient. I'm more important than you are. So whenever I get around to it, I'll do it. Like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of a gift he does not give. Holding something over someone's head because you have it and they don't. That's prideful. Oh, you need that? Yeah, I'll give it to you. Just not right now. It's inconvenient. Pride. We don't want others to know maybe the circumstance that we find ourselves in. We maybe we're embarrassed by it, and they make us look less than we really are. So we lie about it. What about the next one? Hatred. And it's all under one. Hatred in chapter 16. Write that down right. That is not. Let me try 26. I may get it right. We'll see. 26:24. Whoever hates disguises himself with his lips and harbors deceit in his heart. When he speaks graciously, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Though his hatred be covered with deception, his wickedness will be exposed in the assembly. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and a stone will come back on him who starts it rolling. A lying tongue hates its victims, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Any question on what's the what it has to say about hating as a form of lying? I think that sums it up pretty well. A lying tongue hates his victim. It will roll back on him like somebody who starts rolling a stone. It's going to come back on him and crush him. And then we look at lying for convenience. The same chapter, verse 18. Like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is a man who deceives his neighbor and says, I'm only joking. You ever done that? Said something to somebody you maybe shouldn't have had. Oh, I was just joking. I was just joking. I didn't mean it. Lying for convenience. You ever have somebody call and say, hey, tell them I'm not here? I'll ever do that? It's just a little white lie. It's all right. You ever have your kids say, oh, no, I'm not here? What are we teaching them? It's just a little white lie. It's okay. It's a lie of convenience. No, that dinner really was great, honey. A lie of convenience. Oh, that dress makes you look fantastic. Younger husband, yeah, I can tell you're losing weight. We don't lie to be mean. We're not lying to make ourselves look better. We're lying to help somebody, make somebody feel better, so it's okay, isn't it? We rationalize that it is, but is it? And then in chapter 11, we look at covetousness. Chapter 11. Get there. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord. In 2010, unequal weights and unequal measurements are both alike an abomination to the Lord. What's that telling us? What do we read here? What are they doing?
Cheating.
They're cheating. Have people bringing in their items to be measured out as forms of payment. And they're cheating the weights so that they can get more than what they deserve. Do we do that? Do we do that at work maybe? Do we cheat on time? Do we cheat on materials? what about a false witness? In 14:15, or 14:5? 14:5. I cannot read this morning, so this may be long or really short. 14:5 says, "A faithful witness does not lie, but a false witness breathes out lies." What do we do with our tongue? If we are lying with our tongue, if we are being a false witness, what do we talk about? Why is false witness different than lying? Just regular lying? You remember going back a few weeks?
Perverse justice.
It perverts justice. A witness is somebody who comes in to testify that they have seen or they have knowledge of certain events or certain happenings. So when you go in and you testify falsely, you're perverting justice. You're keeping somebody from getting what is due them, or keeping them from getting what they don't deserve, right?
The secondary application, I think, here is the fact that it just comes so naturally to what they're doing. It says the false witness breathes out lies. And that's just something we do so naturally without thinking. They're either practice this story so much that it's just coming naturally, or they're able to just naturally just spread all these lies and just let it be. And it seems like there's nothing different than speaking the truth.
Right. And you can see that in some people's lives, where it's almost natural, whether we're talking about a false witness or just in their life in general. It's almost like they practice it. They have lived in lies for so long that it's second nature to them. You ask them a question, it's just right off the top of their head. Do we practice it? Is it something that we're really good at? If it's something we're really good at, we've got some problems, don't we? In 19 verse 5, it says, "A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will not escape." If we use our tongue to lie, there's going to be a punishment that's involved. Sure, we can make that right. We can repent of our sin of lying, and we can be right in God's eyes, but are there consequences? Oh, yeah. I've dealt with my fair share. But there are consequences here and now for lying. Second thing we're going to look at is tongue that brings death sows discord. And we looked at that in chapter 6. It says in verse 19, "A false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers." Why is it so bad? It sows discord among brothers. Why would that be an abomination?
The goal is unity. And there's discord among brethren, then there can't be unity.
Okay. When we look at it in context, it's not just talking about somebody who just sows discord. It's somebody who just sows discord among brethren. Sowing discord amongst God's children is awful because it divides those that God has joined together.
It also discourages new people from wanting to be part of that fellowship when
Okay.
it's so torn up all the time over something.
Okay. We've looked at 16 through 19. We go just a little bit before that, starting in verse 12. It says, "A worthless person, a wicked man, goes about with crooked speech, winks with his eye, signals with his feet, points with his fingers, with perverted heart devises evil, continually sowing discord. Therefore calamity will come upon him suddenly. In a moment he will be broken beyond healing." Talks about a worthless person. That's what the Proverbs says about somebody who sows discord. He is a worthless person. In chapter 18, 6 and 7, it says, "A fool's lips walk into a fight, and his mouth invites a beating. A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are a snare to his soul." He's a contentious spirit looking for faults in others. Do you invite a beating whenever you go in and talk pleasant to somebody? No. Unless you're being sarcastic. But you go in and you're looking for trouble. You're looking to find faults in somebody. You're looking to stir things up. And then in 19, verse 13, it says, "A foolish son is ruin to his father, and a wife's quarreling is continual dripping of rain." And then in chapter 27, verse 15, it says, "A continual dripping on a rainy day and a quarrelsome wife are alike." Tongue that sows discord is a tongue that nags. What's a specific example here? We could say it. What's a specific example?
About a wife, yeah.
It's talking about the wife. What's the general purpose that we can use for this? Is it just about a wife? Is a wife the only one that nags? Easy, David.
I used to go to church, and there was an elderly man there who had a thing about people using pitch pipes. He thought they were instruments, and that they shouldn't be allowed to use one to do that. And the only person there who could use a pitch pipe was my mom, so it likely wouldn't have ever come up. And yet, every time they started in a Bible class, he managed to turn it to where the pitch pipe was evil and just would go on and on to where, actually that congregation wound up splitting because they just couldn't not get away from that guy and that. It was like constant, and I'm using like too much, I'm sorry. But he was just constantly over that one inconsequential thing to where he disrupted the congregation to where it split.
Right. And it's not specifically about women. Women are used here as an example. But it's not, the application we get is not just about women, it's about nagging in general. We have an example there. I've got examples, you've got examples of men who nag. It sows discord among brethren. I've had similar examples, with not leading an invitation song out of the invitation section of the Hymns for Worship book. I was told that was wrong. We have examples that sow discord among brethren. And we won't go through these, but 25:23 talks about backbiting. 26:17 talks about busybodies. That sows discord among brethren. And that brings us to the third one, which is gossip. We see in chapter 16, 27 and 28. It says, "A worthless man plots evil, and his speech is like a scorching fire. A dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisperer separates close friends." In chapter 18, verse 8, it says, "The words of a whisperer are like a delicious morsel. They go down in the inner parts of the body." What's that telling us?
It lingers.
Say it again.
It lingers.
It lingers. It's juicy. Tell me some of that juicy stuff. You know something about so-and-so that, man, I'd love to know that. Delicious. We want to hear more of it.
King James Version translates that as wounds. The words of the talebearer are as wounds. And they go down into the innermost parts of the belly.
It lingers around. It's something that we kind of crave. If something starts with
don't tell anybody, then don't listen. It's easy for us to say, I don't want to take part in gossip, and then somebody starts telling you something, and what happens? That changes your perspective of the person they're talking about. That changes your perspective of them as well. They're juicy morsels. Tell us what we don't know about somebody. Tell me about it. I want to know what you know. But in chapter 11, 13, it tells us that it is slandering. We stir up strife, and we gossip and share secrets that shouldn't be shared. But when we hold our tongue in chapter 26, verses 20 through 22, it talks about when we hold our tongue, strife ceases. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody just held their tongue? Didn't speak about things that they didn't need to be speaking about? Strife would cease. But enough of the negatives. Spend the last little bit talking about positives. The first part of 1821 that we looked at was that death was in the power of the tongue. The second part is that life is in the power of the tongue. I think if we spend our time focusing on the positive use of the tongue, that's going to leave very little time for us to negatively use the tongue, isn't it? We talk about flaws in our character. There's a three-circle in recovery groups. There's a three-circle diagram. You've got the outer circle of the positive things you want to do in your life, the things that you want to focus on to help you be a better person. Then you got the middle circle. It's things that you need to stay away from because it's, kind of iffy ground. And there's the inner circle that you need to stay away from because it's taking you bad places. And you look at those circles, and if you look at the outer circle, the things you focus on, if you spend your life devoted to working on those things in your life, those other circles aren't going to matter. The same thing is true with our tongue. If we focus on doing what is good and saying the things that need to be said to edify and encourage each other, the negative things, the death that the tongue brings, is not something we need to worry about. In Matthew chapter 12, Matthew 12, starting verse 33. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Look back over your life. How will you be judged? Will we be justified, or will we be condemned by what we say? Going forward in our lives, how will we be judged? The first aspect of how our tongue brings forth life is through teaching the truth. In Proverbs chapter 3, starting verse 13. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, and the one who gets understanding, for the gain from her being wisdom. For the gain from wisdom is better than from silver, and her profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and her path, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold her fast call her blessed. How do we get wisdom except through teaching? We have others teach us, and we obtain wisdom. We may teach ourselves, and we obtain wisdom. And guess what? We obtain wisdom when we teach others as well, don't we? How do we do that? How do we gain wisdom when we teach others?
Always learn more when you teach. Yeah, because you have to look at it deeper and more from different aspects depending on who you're teaching.
That's very true. You have to study. You have to know what you're talking about in order to teach. And it helps us to gain that wisdom. The more I teach, the more wisdom I gain because I have to continue to study and learn. Chapter 4, verse 5, starting verse 5, get insight, or get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her wisdom, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. Prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. This is a father teaching his son here. Parents have to teach their children, and as a result, it's going to lengthen their lives. In chapter 22, verse 6, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, what? He will not depart from you. Not only are you giving life to those you impart truth to, but you receive a reward as well. In chapter 11, verse 20, it says, "Those of crooked hearts are an abomination to the Lord, but those of blameless ways are His delight." We're called wise when we win souls to Christ. In verse 21, it says, "Be assured." That's not right. Be assured, evil person will not go unpunished, but the offspring of the righteous will be delivered. We have rewards for teaching. We have rewards for being wise and using our wisdom to teach others. The gospel message is dependent upon this, isn't it? On our tongue bringing life through teaching the truth. What's Mark 16:15 say?
Go out among the nations.
What's that? Go into all the world. Teach who? Teach who? Proclaim to all creation. Proclaim to everybody the gospel message. Now, yeah, that's talking about the apostles specifically here, but we look throughout the New Testament, we see that call for each of us to be active in teaching the truth. The second thing we see is tongue that brings life will be a tongue that reproves. In chapter 27, 27 verse 5, it's better is open rebuke than hidden love. In 28, verse 23, it says, "Whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor than he who flatters with his tongue." And then in chapter 13, verse 18, it says, "Poverty and disgrace will come to him who ignores instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is honored." We look at parents teaching their children, but how is reproof different than teaching? Or is it different?
It's a subset
A subset?
of teaching.
Okay.
Yeah. I will tell you a true story about me. I found when I first heard that Jane Fonda was professing to be a Christian, I happened to be at work. And I said out loud, unfortunately, I really hate to hear that because I was looking forward to her burning in hell. I actually said that out loud. And one of the ladies that worked with me got all up in my face about that. She said, shame on you. That's not the way a Christian talks. And she just lectured me. And you know what? I deserved every single minute of that. She yelled at me in front of God and everybody. There were people in there. And you know what? To this day, that's some of the best things that anybody has ever said to me was that woman pulling me up short and holding a mirror up to what I did. She was completely right. That was a completely bad thing that I did. So, you know, and I absolutely am grateful to her because it made me think and continues to make me think to this day about what I say about people and how I feel about people.
Right. And you know, it's important for us to have that ability to reprove or rebuke people whenever they need it. The other aspect of that is we have to be willing to accept it also, right?
You just clarified it, because I was gonna ask, is reproof necessarily teaching?
Yes.
Is it?
I think so.
It's an,
You're teaching from you're teaching through correction.
it's an attempt at teaching. It doesn't mean it's learning.
What's the definition for reproof? To rebuke or criticize for something doing wrong?
Well, actually, whenever you look at it in the Hebrew here, you're looking at the exact same word as instruct and rebuke.
Yeah.
You know, so it's basically the same, like you said, a subset of, you can instruct somebody without rebuking them.
Yeah.
But I think through rebuke or reproof, that is an act of instruction or an act of teaching in some way.
One of the things that may cause a little bit of the confusion is it's not necessarily teaching someone something new.
Right. I think that's a big
It's
difference.
reproving things that have been taught previously, possibly. It's just exposing them to an error and teaching them that is wrong and that the way they're behaving is wrong. And so it's not necessarily new information, but I think you can still qualify it as teaching.
Anytime I make corrections to kids' work in the classroom, it's to teach them what you did wrong this way, this is how you're supposed to do it. So I think it's always a form of teaching, but like you said, not necessarily new information, but somebody used the word reteach somewhere, and I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that.
Reinforcing.
What's that?
Reinforcing what they might already know, but
That's good.
have forgotten.
Yeah, and that's what I put. If you look at context, I think it's different. Teaching is imparting knowledge, while rebuking is correcting back to the way they know. So it's kind of reinforcing.
You look at what the debate early on that circumcision played in the church. I mean, how many times does that have to be taught, retaught? Do we or don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Just kind of run through here real quick because we're out of time. Proper speech is the third one. Similar to discipline, we see the other aspect in 25:11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. A word that is spoken that fits its circumstance is amazingly beautiful. It requires us to listen to what is being said, to understand what circumstances we're in. Job's friends understood and they sat with him. And then they forgot and they started speaking out of turn. Listen. When it requires us to do three things, and that is just how to speak, when to speak, and what to speak. How we speak directly impacts someone, how someone receives our words. We have to listen and speak accordingly. When to speak, do we speak without much thought, or do we take our time and know whether we should speak or just be there? Speaking when the time is right takes practice, takes thought, takes listening, takes caring, takes wisdom, as does knowing what to speak. In chapter 10, verse 19, when words are many, transgression is not lacking. More is not better. Just because you're talking doesn't mean you're helping. Knowing what to say is important. You don't always have to give an answer. You don't always have to talk. Sometimes you just have to listen. Restraint is sometimes the best policy. I think these three things are so critical for being a good friend, for being a good spouse, for being a good neighbor, but most importantly for being a good Christian. We have to have these three things. And then finally, the tongue of the righteous is a choice silver, brings healing, is a tree of life, and is a precious jewel. How do we use our tongue? Do we use it properly? Do we use it improperly? We rushed through this, but I appreciate the comments we have, and look forward to next week. Thank you.